You know what's a mantra I've been living by recently?
Did you say this last week?
Yeah, but I change mantras every week, man. Whatever speaks to me at the time, I just follow. And you want to hear my mantra for this week?
What's that?
I'll take my time anywhere, and I also free. I'm free to speak my mind anywhere. And also, with how I adapt mantras and how I live my life, I'll redefine anywhere.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
And welcome back, everybody, to the best music podcast on this side of the Mississippi, hosted by two dashingly good looking men who share the same middle name. I'm the one, I'm the only. I am the undisputed Ryan James Kearns.
And I am the one, the only, the I'm surprised I'm up right now because I was up later than you, Matthew James Durzik.
And this podcast is called Hey, Listen to This. And first of all, thank you for listening to this episode. If this is your very first time tuning into this podcast, what me and Matt do here is every week we take turns picking albums that we're going to dissect for one reason or another. And I mean, it could be just as simple as like, hey, this is a very popular album this year. Or, hey, this is an album that we've grown to appreciate over the years, and we want to share it with the other person on the other side of the microphone setup here. And yeah, it's as simple as that. It's been it's a really fun time for both me and Matt here. So last week we discussed an album that was, I don't want to say pivotal, but like it was a cornerstone or just a fixture of when I made the pivot into really diving into indie rock and other forms of music with the 2007 release Because of the Times by One Kings of Leon.
Yes, and that was a good album. I'm not sure what I was expecting with that, but I pretty much got what I thought. In the very few things I was expecting, I got what I got, and it was a solid, nice, rootsy kind of sort of halfway between mainstream and indie type of record that I appreciate quite a bit.
Yeah, and for those of you who aren't initiated into what that album can bring to the table, one, go check it out. Both me and Matt have a positive feelings about it. And after you get done checking out that album, check out that episode and see what we had to say about it and see if your thoughts and opinions line up with what we had to say. So pivoting to this week, we're changing gears. I don't want to say a complete 360 or 180, but we're definitely changing gears with what's on the docket for this episode.
Yes, we are, and slight peek behind the curtain, I am choosing a bigger, blacker album this week, which is Metallica's 1991 release, simply entitled Metallica, which many fans refer to as the Black Album. And my history with Metallica and this album in particular is a little interesting. Believe it or not, my dad was the one who introduced me to Metallica sort of at a young age, because when I was younger in 2002, I was starting to get into hockey with the Pittsburgh Penguins. And my dad, knowing this, said, hey, this here's a song that they used to play when the Penguins came out into the arena earlier in the decade, in the 90s. And so I listened to it, and it's the opening track off this album. Now, that's kind of how it stood for many years until I got into high school, and then I started listening to more music and expanding my musical knowledge. But ultimately with Metallica, I pretty much am still where I am, where I'm more on the side of this album is sort of my go-to with Metallica, and the others have sort of crept in piece by piece, but not really too much. And another peek behind the curtain, this is not the first time that me and Ryan have discussed Metallica in a broadcasting format, but hopefully this will be the best time that we do that, because the last time was a little bit more on the amateurish / college / Matt didn't know what the hell he was talking about side.
I mean, that's all about life, man. You live and you grow and you adapt and you evolve into who you are today. And who we are today are, I would like to say that we're pretty, knowledgeable guys who, know a thing or two about a thing or two. So my history with Metallica, I feel like I have a little bit of a more. I have a little bit more knowledge about their discography than you, because I would say probably the Black Album was probably my starting point with songs like Enter Sandman and The Unforgiven and Nothing Else Matters. And then from there, I don't know, I kind of pivoted all over the place. I've checked out, the previous albums. Most notably, for my 18th birthday, I went to an FYE. Remember FYE?
I do.
I purchased Master of Puppets by Metallica on CD. That was one of my most clear memories of my 18th birthday. And yeah, I mean, I'm fairly familiar with their discography as a whole. A couple of their more up-to-date releases I'm not as familiar with, only because I don't really have much of an interest in what Metallica is currently doing. But if I ever get the itch, I can always go back to the Black Album or any other albums that they have before that weren't released in the 2020s. That being said, though, I feel like I'm not your typical Metallica fan, because I feel like the Metallica fan base. Well, I don't want to compare it to the Star Wars fan base, where it's very divisive, and you have your camps of this side is the best, this side is the best. But with this album here particularly, we see a shift in Metallica's musical direction, where they go from their thrash metal style of their previous 4 studio albums to a more, I don't want to say a more commercial, because a lot of the themes and the song structures in this album here alone aren't 100% commercial. I mean, there is one song that is kind of commercial, we'll get to it, but it's a more heavy metal sound. It still had characteristics of thrash metal, but a lot of fans look at this album as a pivot point, and it caused a divide in the fan base. And even after this album here specifically, we get Fuel, not Fuel, Load, then Reload, albums that people don't really like at all. And then eventually we get Saint Anger, which we're not even going to talk about that album. But yeah, it just seems this is a very important album to discuss in Metallica's discography.
Yeah, and I'm kind of glad you brought up the whole idea of this changing their sound, and I understand what you mean by not going as far as saying divisive, but at the same time, it definitely does provide a new sound in which some were not a fan of and others were a fan of. Of course, a lot of people were fans of this album. It became one of the best-selling albums of all time. And where we fall on that spectrum is something we're about to find out right now. So, you ready to get things started?
Yeah, I'll let you take the lead on Enter Sandman, the opening track off of this album here.
Yes, the opening track is Enter Sandman. It is, I guess it's the lead single off this album as well, and it's certainly one of the first songs, if not the first song, that a lot of people know when it comes to Metallica. And right away you can hear the difference in their sound. It's a lot more... I don't want to see. This is the part where people are like, "Oh, this isn't what Metallica sounds like," because Metallica used to sound very either orchestral or very heavy polyrhythmic thrash metal, like you heard on Master of Puppets, etc. But realistically, they've had songs that have chugged along at a basic tempo. I can just think right off the top of the head of "Seek and Destroy" or "For Whom the Bell Tolls." But this still felt different. This still felt like it was a massive change in style. And the Massive Change basically features Lars Ulrich's drumming, which to me sounds the best it's ever sounded on this album and on this track in particular. Just keeping everything so tight and so crystal clear. Also, shout out to producer Bob Rock for creating such a very clear and concise metal sound. The riff by James Hetfield is obviously iconic. Kirk Hammett's solo towards the end of the song is pretty well known and legendary. And even Jason Newsted on bass, is right there with Hetfield and Ulrich, providing this just very just sort of locked in groove that has become so synonymous with not just Metallica themselves, but also just major sporting events. Like, again, the Penguins came out to this song in the 90s. If you've never seen video of Virginia Tech football come out to this song, I highly recommend that. And because of that, and I know this is going to come off basic, and I apologize to the diehard 80s Metallica fans that this will probably piss off, but this is my favorite song off the album. Not even close. It is such a strong performance all around. Production-wise, drumming-wise, guitar-wise, everything. Even James's vocals, James Hetfield's vocals is very much right in time with the attack and sort of the basic nightmare vision that this song has lyrically. And granted, the lyrics aren't amazing always. The second verse has been kind of noted for how relatively pedestrian it is. But again, the band sounds so good that I'm willing to forgive that. So, yeah, Enter Sandman right out of the gate, number one song on the album for me.
It's interesting whenever we talk about, like, iconic songs, and I think to myself, what else can we say that hasn't been said about this song? I mean, like, if one of us has a bad take about a song, cool, speak up. I'm not gonna have a bad take about this song. This song rocks for a reason. So, I mean, you're right there with you. I'm right there with you. Like, the performances are super solid. Everything just sounds so crisp and so, like, that groove that you can get lost into. It adds to just what the song is bringing to the table. Like, the main thing that draws me to this song here specifically is just like how it begins with a gradual build, and then you get the shift in the tone from, like, you get the verse, and then you get the pre-chorus, and then the chorus, where it's just like you get that shift in, like, I don't know, like a sense of anxiety and dread, and, like, I'm all for that, like, sonic shift, whether it's, like, on a instrumental side, vocal side, lyric side, everything works so well in unison there. I'm gonna be honest with you, like, every single track here that has a guitar solo, I'm just gonna say is super solid. There's gonna be one solo in particular that I'm gonna say that is my favorite, but the solo here is solid in its own right. Like, it's really good. Yeah, I mean, and I'm gonna stand out on a ledge here, or stand up on a soapbox, or just defend something here, because, like, you mentioned the second verse being kind of like, kind of basic. I don't know. I feel like it adds to, like, the sense of dread and anxiety. I mean, like, lyrics reading, something's wrong, shut the light, heavy thoughts to the night, and they aren't of Snow White. And Snow White, like, you think is, like, Disney. Disney is, like, happiness. Like, you aren't thinking of good thoughts there. And then, like, next set of lyrics within that verse are dreams of war, dreams of liars, dreams of dragons, fire, and things that bite. Like, it adds to that sense of, like, dread and anxiety. Like, sometimes, like, and this is funny coming from the lyrical, like, obsessed mind that I am, but, like, sometimes lyrics don't have to be, like, this grand statement. Like, they can just be a tool to add to, like, the feeling and the message of a song that's actually being, presented to to the listener. And then like the drop off after the solo works so well, and that bridge section is just so iconic. Where he's just like, "Now I lay me down to sleep," saying like having the kids say that prayer. And a couple other things I'm going to mention about Enter Sandman here is like, so the whole concept of like, Enter Sandman came from um, whenever James Hadfield, where he spoke to a organization called Uncut, and he's quoted in saying this: "I wanted more of the mental thing where this kid gets manipulated by what adults say. You know, when you wake up with that shit in your eye, that's supposedly being put in there by the Sandman to make you dream." So the guy in the song tells this little kid, and he kind of freaks, and he can't sleep after that, and it works the opposite way. Instead of a soothing thing, the tables turn. So, like, right away we get, like, lyrical themes of, like, alienation, anxiety, and, like, just darkness as a whole. And like, that goes well with, like, what the Black Album is, like, as a whole, like, how all the songs work together. And then, like, just, Enter Sandman's, like, is an iconic song. It has many placements on, like, different, media outlets, best songs or greatest songs of, like, all time, like, most notably on Rolling Stone. It has this song as its 408th song on their 500 greatest songs of all time. And like, I can go down the line, but like this song slaps. I mean, I can understand why, like, people that grew up listening to Metallica and they have attachments to songs like, Battery and Master of the Puppets and, like, Ride the Lightning, but this song slaps for a reason. And this song is in my top 3 in the album. It's not my favorite, but it's my second favorite song on the album.
That is very respectable. I am curious to find out what is at number 1 coming up soon. But I am glad that you brought up all that you did because, again, like you said, that bridge with the prayer in there, that, again, is very iconic. And it also demonstrates the band's sort of use of dynamics on the song. Because, again, it sort of ebbs and flows in the right places. And again, like you said, too, the heightened sense of anxiety on the chorus, the way that the key changes and just kind of stays there after it transitions from the pre-chorus is such a great musical touch. So, yeah, this song is considered a classic for good reason. And, yeah, I'm glad to see that it landed in your top 3 because, yeah, it's just that good.
So, moving on to the next track, Sad But True. And, we go from, like, Enter Sandman, which is an iconic hard rock track, where, like, to this track here, where you kind of, like, I will be honest with you, man, like, you kind of get the sense of, like, Metallica trying to blend in, like, what they're trying to go for with this sonic pivot, while, like, still having, like, the seeds of their thrash metal, like, roots within the song here. Like, apparently, this song here was once described as the Kashmir for the 90s. Like, Kashmir being like that Led Zeppelin song, which is an interesting comparison, though, because, like, I feel like that song is a little bit more instrumentally dense, and, like, I kind of prefer Kashmir to this song here. This song's not bad by any means, let's be real. Like, the way that it begins with that, the band just jamming and riffing, and then you kind of get the sense of, like, something big is coming down the pipeline. It's almost like, you're, like, it's like you can almost picture, like, a battlefield, and, like, you're waiting for, like, that 700-pound giant to come over the mountainside, and, like, this is how, like, it's actually orchestrated. And And like, that groove after, like, everything kicks off is just so tight and so nasty with 5 Ys at the end of there. But like, it's like this track here. I was very glad I listened to it with, like, headphones on, because, like, in the verses you get this weird atmosphere, and it adds an excellent texture, like, and it really comes across in the chorus pretty well. I love how James is sounding here. He sounds like a very defiant, like, metal god, and the way that the lyrical themes are structured, it kind of reminds me of, like, the story is, like, escaping me, but, like, like, the way that I pictured how this is laid out lyrically, it's almost just like, hey, if the narrator can't complete a task, and needs some of the courage to, like, do something that he himself cannot do, he goes to this alternative persona. It's almost like a schizophrenic kind of, like, song here, and this song is from the point of view of that schizophrenic persona. I mean, lyrics reading, "Hey, I'm your life. I'm the one who takes you there. Hey, I'm your life. I'm the one who cares." Like, there's a couple other, like, examples there. But, like, it's a very interesting song, and with that in mind. And, like, I'm always a sucker for, like, pauses within songs, because, like, you can easily just riff through stuff and, like, go on and on. But, like, like, when you hear like a full stop that occurs in this track right before that guitar solo, oh my goodness, it was chef's kiss for me. And yeah, overall, this is a great track, a great follow-up to Enter Sandman. Did not land in my top 3, but still, I respect it. I wouldn't call it the Kashmir of the 90s, though.
I definitely would not call it the Kashmir of the 90s either. That is, I think maybe the reason someone thought that was because they kind of go at the same tempo and might be in the same key-ish, but that's about where the similarities end. But aside from that, I'm pretty much right there with you. I think this is a very solid, good track. It did not land in my top 3 either. I am not as high on the pause effect as you are, because it felt more obligatory, and it didn't really add much for me in that sense. Like, it definitely made me notice it, but at the same time, it's just like, oh, they just kind of stopped and started again. So, cool. But aside from that, again, I think James sounds really good here. The lyrics, they're not as pronounced or as introspective, grading on a curve there, obviously, as Enter Sandman. But the band sounds really good. The guitar solo is quite good. Again, the rhythm section is locked in. And I can understand why this became sort of a little bit of a hit in and of itself. Like, you'll still hear this on rock radio every once in a while. Again, mentioning the Penguins, they have used this to open up the periods of play before. I mean, it's a good, solid hard rock track. And the lyrics do provide, again, even though I'm not as high on them as I am with Enter Sandman, they do provide, like you say, a good introspective look into some guy who's struggling with inner demons and, dealing with this double persona that he's dealing with. So yeah, this is a good song, but it did not land in my top 3 either.
Okay. Yeah. Not much else I can really say about it. I mean, like, I would say probably the thing that maybe holds it back from popping up into the top 3, and this is going to be a theme for a couple of the later tracks, is the groove that occurs in this track here. For me, it became a little bit stale after a while. I'm like, okay, can you change it up, please? I mean, I get what you're going for, but can you, change up the sonic textures? Like, I don't know. Did you have the same feelings about the groove there?
Not particularly on this track, but I kind of get where you're coming from, because there does become a point in this album where it does feel like things are starting to, stagnate or feel samey. That being said, though, I will disclose that on this review, I do have a top 3, and I do not have a least favorite track on here. I will say that.
Okay. I have a top 3 and a bottom 3. So.
And a bottom 3. Wow. All right.
I know. I'm coming out with the spicy takes, man.
Let's go. I'm here for it.
All right. So the next track.
The next track is Houlier Than Thou. Now, this is probably the first track sequentially on the Black Album that the most basic of Metallica fans, i.e. myself, would not be familiar with if they had not heard the album before. And this came out of left field for me. This track, I think, is really, 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 really good. Mainly because, once again, the performances by Ulrich, Hetfield, and especially Newsted on this track. I mean, that bass solo towards the end of the track, I was just like, yes, please, more of that, please. But yeah, I think the drumming on here is quite solid. This is more of a throwback to their thrash in a sense. Like, you could easily have heard this on something like Kill 'Em All or even Ride the Lightning in a sense. And the lyrics too, again, they're pretty basic, but they're really, really good. Basically describing, this ulterior antagonist that's just, thinking that they're better than you for whatever reason that it may be. And when James says, "Who the hell are you?" right before the solo, you're just like, yeah, no, I'm vibing with this a lot. And this is a great track for anyone who basically knows somebody who feels like they're better or, as the track says, holier than thou. And I think we have the best lyrics on the album so far in that regard. And again, the band sounds great. It's pretty simplistic otherwise. And believe it or not, we have hit my number 3 track off this album with Holier Than Thou.
Oh, I mean, I can totally respect that. I mean, this song's pretty good. It's not in my top 3, but I was really digging what the track brought to the table here, and to continue on with the trope that is ever present in our show, good sir. This is Metallica's "Idiot Wind."
Fair enough. That's actually that might be the most direct comparison to "Idiot Wind" I think we've had since you started that.
Yeah. But yeah, you hit a lot of you hit a lot of the points right away. I mean, obviously, the lyrical themes you touched on pretty well. One moment, right out of the gate, you get lyrics like, "No more, the crap rolls out your mouth again, haven't changed, your brain is still gelatin." You get the sense of what this track is really about. And like you said, it rolls into more of Metallica's thrashy side. It's a solid song. And yeah, I mean, you get a bass solo for a second here. The groove is so tight, and I love what the guitar work is bringing to the table. And another moment that I'm going to mention here that I like is just how the band and James Hetfield, how they hit notes at the end of the chorus, and it just almost seems like a definitive, it's almost like a punctuation mark musically, and I'm all here for it. Amazing track. I mean, it's funny that, sometimes, I feel like I can kind of get lost in, this big, composition or, this big lyrical themes within a track. This song is pretty cut and dry in terms of lyrical themes, and it knows what it is, and it does it so well. It's an amazing track. Didn't land in my top 3, came very close, but I respect the hell out of it, man.
It really is good, and I do agree with you that the little musical notes that are at the end of the chorus, where it's just James shouting words, Yeah, no, that hits just as well because it provides sort of a nice like transition from it to wherever it goes next. So I agree that was good too. So ready to move on to the Unforgiven?
Yes, I am ready to move on to the Unforgiven. So, um, little background about this track here. This song is about the struggles that James had with religion-related stuff to his mom's death. Apparently, and we'll get into this with the God That Failed. There's more background to that a little bit, but yeah. So with the Unforgiven, I knew that this was a big song off the album, like, and I was going off of Spotify plays, but like I knew that this was a notable song because you get like, obviously Enter Sandman, Nothing Else Matters, and then there's a significant drop off, but then you get the Unforgiven in terms of Spotify plays, and I think the reason why this track gets a lot of plays, well, I mean, it's a you get more of that ballady kind of like shift here, like that intro with that nice western theme with that bare acoustic guitar and the percussion instruments. I thought that was a nice touch, and then how the rest of the band just slides into the song and immediately adds a bigger and better texture to the song is really good. And that's where the compliments stop. And so like the issues that I have with this song here, because like lyrically I really dig what James is going for here. He's looking at himself and he's really just battling demons. Like there's lyrics that literally spell out: a tired man they see no longer cares. The old man then prepares to die regretfully. That old man, here is me. And even like that set of lyrics, it's just like, say, like, you didn't really need to say, like, that old man, here is me. Like, you can just draw the comparison, and like anybody that has like, a sense of a brain can draw one on one together, be like, oh, hey, James is talking about himself here. Hey, you don't really need to say, hey, I'm the problem, it's me. But yeah, I mean, the guitar solo is decent. It helps bring up the song's, like, merits up for a little bit. But my main issue here is this song drags, man. And not even in a good sense, because, I mean, we'll get on, like, when we talk about one of the later songs in the albums, I don't mind Metallica whenever they go into a slower, more ballady kind of theme, like song structure wise, but it just, things aren't lining up, and it just, there's not enough there for me to like just sit there, and like it just feels like he just kind of vamps on about the same thing, and I'm like, oh, okay, I get it, but nothing is changing, and like, maybe trim down the song a little bit and I might like it a little bit more, but honestly, man, this song is it's not good. And it is my least favorite track on the album.
Least favorite? Wow.
Yeah.
That's a spicy chili pepper there. It is not my least favorite song on the album. It's also not in my top 3. Because I do like the chorus on there, and I don't think it drags as much as you do. If anything, my issue sonically are the verses, where it feels like the band's just kind of there. Like, it feels like the guitar is mixed up with James's vocals, so it kind of all just kind of blends together. The other major issue I had with this song is lyrically, like you mentioned, like he says, like, the old man is me. I'm kind of glad you brought that up, because listening to this song just as on its own, like, it felt like the perspective of who James was talking about and talking to shifted from the verses to the chorus back to the verses. Like, they were two different perspectives, and that he wasn't talking about himself. And it kind of still feels that way, where it feels like he's talking sort of, Like the verses are, "We live in a society," whereas the chorus is, "I live in this hellhole of my own mind." I mean, again, I think the orchestral backdrop that kicks the song off is kind of nice. But I agree. This song isn't necessarily as deserving of the clout that it has gotten over the years. Again, I think the hook is riffy enough and it doesn't drag on. It wasn't in my top 3, and I kind of understand why you don't like it, and it's your least favorite song on the album. But I thought it was okay. It's solid. It's fine. It's the Unforgiven. You know what you're getting.
And I'm not forgiving the Unforgiven, to be honest with you.
Simple enough.
I mean, it's still not going to be as ragey as me talking about, like, my least favorite track off of our previous review. But, dude, like, I was just brain dead after a while after listening to this. And, like, I don't know. Like, no, I know. Like, it's just not enough changed. You were right on the money when talking about the verses where the band's just there. And even that chorus, like, I don't know, it doesn't do enough for me. It's a nothing burger. It's just there. And he just vamps on it time in, time out. And, like, it almost seems like, and, like, it's an interesting statement for me to make here, considering what the lyrics are supposed to be about, but it almost seems like this song was kind of half-assed, and it's just like, oh, hey, yeah, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna have Western stuff, and we're just gonna keep talking about being unforgiven. Like, come on, man, just change things up. Here's a simple solution for this. After, like, one of the last choruses, just don't sing. Let the band riff for the rest of the time on the track. Let them play with the track a little bit more, and this song instantly rises, like, 2 to 3 points in my opinion. But yeah, it just sucks.
That would be an interesting version of the song, now that you mention it, that maybe, like we've talked about before, letting the band breathe at the end, and maybe sort of taking the backdrop of the chorus and maybe having Kirk do something over that. That would have been an interesting take on it. But again, I'm a little higher on this track than you. Not so high that I have in my top 3, but I understand where you're coming from. So, are you ready to move on to the next track?
Yeah, the next track is Wherever I May Roam. And I'm going to take a second to breathe, so I'm going to let you talk about Wherever I May Roam.
No problem. So this track, it starts very much, we talked about the intro to the last track. The intro to this track, for whatever reason, metal bands in the early 90s, whether visually or sonically, tended to have this sort of weird obsession with the desert. And off the top of my head, I could think of the guitar interlude in Megadeth's Holy Wars, or the music video for Slayer's Seasons in the Abyss. 2 songs I love, for the record, but they're sort of, themed in the desert, and there was this sort of theme of, we're going to go out to the desert and, do things and recognize that the desert exists, that, the Middle East exists, probably because of what was going on politically at the time, but that's a big old bag of can of worms that we don't have to get into right now. So that intro is interesting, and then the song itself starts kind of on the meh side, like it kind of just is there, but after a while, the way that James sings Anywhere I Roam, that is a nice touch. I think the outro to this track is pretty nice as well. Not a song that's in my top 3, because we get to the point of the album, for me personally, where things start to stagnate just a little bit. Not necessarily in a bad way. Again, I think the song sounds fine. I think it sounds nice. But at the same time, it doesn't really stick out as a track where it's just like, whoa, they did this. Because at this point, you're just thinking, yeah, they did this. They're Metallica. That's what they do. So, I think the way that this song goes is pretty good and pretty nice. Not a standout track, but solid nonetheless.
So I'm a bit higher on this track than you are, and I'm gonna, even before revealing where it lands in my top three. Um, I'm gonna talk about, like, it's just an interesting, like, it's a very interesting track in terms of, like, where it's placed in the album's narrative, because despite my thoughts about the Unforgiven, like, you think about, like, how that song was supposed to come across, where James was taking a look at, like, his upbringing, and how, like, religion had failed him, and, like, um, apparently, like, even before his mother's death, like, his dad left him and his mom. And so his mom died, his dad left. He didn't really have a home, and, like, he, like, even in the home that he could have had in religion, like, he looked at that as the reason why his mom died. So, like, with the track, like, Wherever I Roam, it shows James really finding his own way into, like, creating, like, his own home, and that's basically, like, the open road. Like, this song is is supposedly about a drifter that just walks the earth and is perfectly content about being on the road all the time. And that could be an easy, like, metaphor with how, like, how much Metallica tours. Apparently that's their main draw for, like, fans nowadays. Apparently they put on one hell of a show. One thing that I was jealous of a ex-girlfriend years ago is she saw Metallica at MSG, which I would have killed to see that, but, like, that was probably, like, one hell of an expensive ticket, which, I mean, I don't have the money for it, and, it is what it is. I'm perfectly content with the amount of concerts.
It's MSG.
Yeah, pretty much. So, but yeah, just, a lot of the stuff that you talked about already with this track, I really do dig. You get how the Unforgiven began with that little Western kind of theme. Wherever I roam still goes with that. The twangy guitars and the booming bass drums, they work out so well. Like, the groove after that, that is established, is pretty tight. The band plays with tempo and song structure throughout the track, and I love it. Where, like, you get moments where, like, they speed up in certain sections, where the mood shifts, and then they slow down, where James talks about more personal lyrics. I felt like that was a nice touch, and another moment that I picked up, and that was primarily due to, like, me listening to this on, like, headphones, is, like, I loved that right before, like, it verses began, you can hear, like, faint vocals that are basically, it almost seems like they're trying to tell James what to sing. And that could, like, go into, like, more themes about alienation and schizophrenia and, like, like, mental illness. Well, I don't want to say mental illness, but, like, just, like, just a couple of the themes that we talked about in this album already. I felt like that was a nice touch. One of my lyrical highlights off of this track here is, "And the earth becomes my throne. I adapt to the unknown. Under wandering stars I've grown. By myself, but not alone. I ask no one." So it's basically James making a defiant statement, saying, like, hey, I'm gonna conquer this this world, and I'm gonna be here for it. I'm gonna adapt to whatever it brings to myself. I'm gonna do it alone. Overall, really great track. I love, like you mentioned, like, how wherever the band and James link up during, like, whenever he sings the title of the track, the guitar solo is pretty solo too. And then, yeah, that's basically all I want. All my notes on the track are, and in terms of placement in the top three of this album, can you guess if it's my favorite track or my third favorite track?
I'm going to say it is your third favorite track.
You are correct. Circle gets the square again, man. But yeah, excellent track. I love it. It's such a simple theme, but the way the band comes together, it's an easy win for me.
I totally get that. Again, the track kind of started slow for me, but as it went along, I came to dig it quite a bit too. And yeah, no, I think your perspective on it is very respectable. And I do agree with some of the things that you're talking about. Yeah, so yeah, no, this is a solid track on the album, and I think we're ready to move on to "Don't Tread on Me."
The new national anthem. Let's make it the new national anthem.
Nah, let's not do that.
So I'll kick off. Don't tread on me. So James Hetfield described the song as just one of those "don't fuck with us" songs. For those of you who have been in existence, you probably have seen the flag that has the rattlesnake with the slogan "Don't tread on me" underneath it. That's obviously like the where Metallica is taking the title of the track and like a lot of the lyrical themes from. I was hooked into this track right away with the guitar making use of the melody of America featured in the West Side Story. I felt like that was a great touch. And it's interesting with this track here because I almost got kind of a swing groove here with how the the band was grooving through here, and I was kind of sucked into it. And I love how the way that the band comes together for the title of the track, where it's "Don't Tread on Me," it's so tight. And then yeah, the triplet interludes that you get throughout the track is great. And then the guitar solo is solid. Lyrics are pretty cut and dry, but one of my favorite sections lyrically is "Liberty or death, what we so proudly hail. Once you provoke her, rattling of her tail, never begins it, never, but once engaged, never surrenders, showing the fangs of rage." Overall, it kind of goes into that bucket of songs where it's just I get what the band's going for. It's pretty cut and dry. It's good. I love what they're doing with the grooves. Just didn't do enough with didn't do enough with the song and the instrumentals or the lyrical themes to elevate it up to the likes of "Wherever I May Roam" or it's kind of hard to beat "Enter Sandman," which, I mean, there is a track that beats "Enter Sandman" in my eyes, but we'll get to that. But overall, decent enough song. Yeah, I have no complaints about "Don't Tread on Me."
I really don't either, and I think you pretty much echoed my thoughts about this song. The only real difference is that when I heard it and when I kept hearing it, the song that I kept coming back to was another Metallica song from earlier in their career, "For Whom the Bell Tolls," because that's the kind of vibe I got from this, sort of the same groove, the sort of swing that you mentioned, or swing adjacent feel that this track provides. But aside from that, the most interesting part about it is that part where they go, "Don't tread on me," before they get into the chorus. Aside from that, you're right. The lyrics are pretty cut and dry. It's once again Metallica saying we live in a society, and that set of lyrics you mentioned is actually kind of a lot more patriotic than I remember it being. You can almost see someone like Toby Keith, or maybe even one of the more newer country artists I don't think Chris Stapleton could pull this one off, because maybe he could. It would depend on his backing band. That's a wormhole we don't need to go down. Ultimately, my thoughts on this song are pretty much the same as yours. It's fine. It's solid. It's a Metallica song. Didn't elevate itself enough to get into my top 3 or anywhere close, but I didn't hate it.
All right. So before we go on to the back half of the album here, I'm going to take a second to just plug some stuff here. So listener, if you like what me and Matt bring to the table, the best way that you can help support me and Matt is just simply leaving us a positive review on that podcasting platform of choice. And also just make sure you subscribe, follow, whatever action that you need to do to stay up to date with our episodes. It's just, we're going to be cranking out these episodes as long as, me and Matt see fit. And, we're actually coming up on 1 year, believe it or not. And so, we thank you for listening to us over this past, throughout the weeks. It means a lot to us. And as me and Matt explore different artists and different albums, it's been one hell of a journey. And hopefully that you guys have been enjoying that. And yeah, if you guys are interested, there are social media links in the episode description. And if you have an episode recommendation, feel free to hit us up at our email, which is tthaylisten@gmail.com. But yeah, now that I got the plugging out of the way, I think it's time for us to talk about Through the Never.
Through the Never. This kicks off the back half of the Black Album. And this is one of those tracks, much like Holier Than Thou, and much like one that's coming up later on, that feels almost like you've been mentioning, Ryan. There are moments on this track that felt very early Metallica-esque. And if there was a least favorite track on the album for me, this might be it. Simply because, again, I didn't hate it enough to give it that moniker. But once again, it just feels like the band is sort of just doing its own thing. The band's locked in with itself, so again, it sounds good there. James sounds fine. The lyrics sound fine. But just the way that the chorus ends with the sort of that staccato, da 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 da, and then that sort of pause. And I know what you're probably about to say, so I'm bracing myself for that. But it really didn't do a whole lot for me in that regard. But otherwise, the track is fine. The band grooves, so I think. And artists do this a lot where they seem to have one or two sort of consolation tracks where, for those who are expecting a different sound or, sort of put off by the sounds of Enter Sandman or The Unforgiven, it's just like, hey guys, come on back. It's fine. Here's a track that you're probably going to like. So yeah, this song's fine. Not my favorite, obviously, but it's fine.
I'm right there with you, man, to be honest with you. This track here, it could have landed in my bottom three. For that, just... It's not a bad track. I'll start by saying that. But, my main issue with it is that... You kind of alluded to it. It almost seemed like they were trying to, service those thrash metal heads where it's just like, oh man, yeah, I need, songs from, Kill 'Em All and, the Master of the Puppets. But, if you look at the song as its own track, it kind of doesn't do all that much. You get that basic, thrash chugging riff, but, I kind of wish that would change up every once in a while. You get the moments where, the band kind of, stops and starts, and, I'm always a sucker for that, as you alluded to. But, you get moments where the guitar bounces up at the ends of phrases, and the guitar solo is fantastic in its own right, but, after a while, that just chugging, it wore me down in terms of, okay, please just do something else sonically. What I will say, though, is that the lyrics are pretty good. I mean, essentially, what we get here is James Hetfield trying to explore, how mankind is supposed to be, within the universe and how they're supposed to be tackling the unknown. You get lyrics in the dark, see past our eyes, pursuit of truth, no matter where it lies, gazing up to the breeze of the heavens on a quest meaning reason. So, like, you get decent, like, metal lyrics like that. And, like, the call and the response dynamic, well, I don't want to say call and response, but, like, in the bridge where you get that echoey call and response dynamic in the vocals, like, I feel like that's really good. Because it almost seems like you're in, like, kind of a tornado kind of fashion there. But, yeah, overall, though, like, this song is kind of like, it's a mixed bag for me. Like, the chorus is a nothing burger, and like I made my thoughts and feelings known about that chugging thrash metal riff there. And the song just kind of ends in an anticlimactic fashion. So, like, I'm right there with you. Like, this song it's not good. Well, it's not bad. Like, it doesn't do enough to, like, kind of, like, put it down on the Unforgiven territory, but it's just it almost seems like another half-assy kind of track for me.
The one good thing I will say, or I won't even say good thing, but I will say smart thing about this track is where it's placed on the album juxtaposition-wise. Because, like I said, this track does feel like a consolation to Metallica's older fans that were expecting more thrash. And they're basically saying, here's something for you, throwing them a bone, if you will. And it's smartly placed here because the next track very much goes right back to that not Metallica sound that Metallica fans were hoping not to hear. So that being said, let's move on to that track. Probably the second biggest song off this album, and that is Nothing Else Matters. And Ryan, I hand it over to you.
So, yeah, you kind of, like, you did an excellent job setting the table when it comes to, like, Nothing Else Matters. A little bit of a background with me in this track here. I never really took the time to really take a look at the lyrics as well as I did for this review here before. And I remember, like, when I was growing up, high school, college, and I would see, like, people would use this track here as their first dance track for, like, a wedding. And I would be like, oh, come on, this song, like, it's not that romantic or anything like that. Oh man, I was wrong. I was dead wrong with that. But essentially, the way that this song came into, like, existence is that the frontman James Hetfield had been taking classical guitar lessons and wanted to show off his finger picking skills in the introduction. And that little, like, that finger picking that we hear in the beginning came out of a phone call James made with his girlfriend while on tour. Yeah, and dude, I love that opening with the finger picking, and also with how James is sounding vocally in that intro. That first little bit is fantastic, and throughout this whole song, he sounds fantastic vocally. And another thing that I picked up thanks to me listening to this on headphones, I think I switched to earbuds at this point, is that you get guitars that are, like, panned in a specific direction. And here, the moment I'm gonna highlight is, like slightly out of, like, the intro and into the first verse. I love the random textures that you can hear, and the one random texture that I heard is, like, panned to the left. You heard this, like, faint guitar, and I absolutely love that little, like, musical detail. And overall, like, this song builds and builds, and, like, the way that I really did appreciate this song here is that you contrast the first chorus and how it's a little bit underwhelming, but by the time we get to the second chorus, oh man, it is on like Donkey Kong. And even with that, like you get another example of like how the song builds. It's you get the first guitar solo where it's kind of a little bit underwhelming, and then the second one takes it to another level. And like just overall here, the band is just in the pocket so well. It's so disgusting on how well they control this song and how well they're focused. Like this is the kind of song that the Unforgiven wishes it can be in terms of like how like if we're trying to drive this band into a more melodic and contained package that has moments where like they can really explode. This is it here, and even like lyrics that really add to like the themes of love are trust I seek and I find in you every day for us something new, open mind for a different view, and nothing else matters. Like when I looked at this song lyrically, the only other song that I can really compare it to on like the lyrical front in terms of like being a really effective love song is a song that we talked about, Jesus etc. by Wilco. It is an example of a really great love song. I would even say it's a perfect love song, and we've arrived. You probably figured that this was going to be my favorite track on the album based on like how I was actually talking about it, but yeah, this song rules, man.
I'm right there with you. Obviously, I picked Enter Sandman as my favorite track on the album, so this isn't my favorite track on the album, but I do have it at number 2 for a lot of the reasons you were just talking about. Again, that opening is immaculate. The finger picking and the sort of interplay between Hetfield and Kirk Hammett is beautiful. And the way the band shifts dynamically throughout this entire song is perfect. Again, like you said, it builds, it comes back down, it builds again, and it just flows so effortlessly and beautifully. Lyrically, too, it's great. I mean, obviously, the lyrics aren't necessarily, Bob Dylan or Joni Mitchell levels of, descriptive, but they really don't have to be. And for Metallica, I mean, honestly, with an album of this stature, they definitely do a lot with the less is more principle. The lyrics that really set me, because I kind of was thinking like, how much do I actually like the song? And then I was just reminded of that lyric where James is going, "I never opened myself this way. Life is ours. We live it our way." Like that to me is the best set of lyrics on this song, bar none. And the way that his vocals tend to, again, ebb and flow with the track itself. And honestly, too, like, one of the undercutting great things about this track is its subtlety. For comparison, I was just listening to an album a couple days ago while walking called The Lockdown Sessions by Elton John. More or less, Elton John Presents. There is a cover of this song on that album that features Elton John on piano, Yo-Yo Ma on cello, future Metallica bassist Rob Trujillo, and also vocalist Miley Cyrus. And I will warn you right now, for anyone listening, that version sucks. And the reason it sucks is pretty basic. I mean, you can only blame Miley so far, but whoever in the operating room decided she was supposed to sound like James Hetfield really should not ever be allowed behind a producing board ever again. But that's an aside. The real thing, again, with this track is how, for someone as grisly vocally as James is to sound so heartfelt and earnest in the way he's delivering his lines. Again, I'm right there with you. This song is awesome, and it's my number 2 favorite song on this album.
Thank you for clarifying that Miley Cyrus cover there. I mean, I know it was on an Elton John LP, but Miley was singing primarily. Thank you for clarifying that it sucks, because I was just like, oh, that sounds interesting. Okay, no, just don't touch it.
Don't
touch it.
Don't even think about it.
Don't even think about it. Don't even say its name. But yeah, it's interesting that like people don't like for such an emotionally dense song as this, and for how well it was produced, and structured, how some Metallica fans took a look at this song and was just like, no, screw this. I want my you know um Injustice for All, and Ride the Lightning, and Seek and Destroy. Like, I want that. I don't want this. And it's just, I don't know, it's a really fantastic song, as we mentioned. It's like, I'm glad that, well, at least with the top two tracks on this album, like the biggest songs off of here, like we both agree that they slap really hard, and yeah, they're both a great time. So pivoting over to Of Wolf and Man.
Of Wolf and Man. And this kind of goes back to the more up-tempo stylings of a lot of the tracks on the first half of this album. And this basically is a song about how, I'm guessing, James Hetfield was writing about how, the man that is, out in society, has to deal with the inner beast within, and how, there's sort of this primal urge within all of us that has to compete with, this sort of postmodern edition of humanity. And, I'll just say this track did not land in my top three, but it came a really, really close to it, because I really like, much for the same reason I did on Enter Sandman, particularly the way that the chords change on the chorus. They create such a menacing atmosphere, where James just sort of lifts his voice up just that little bit more, and the guitars lift up just a little bit more. Again, I think that's the highlight of this track by far. Otherwise, though, realistically, not a whole lot to talk about. Again, the lyrics, like I said, they talk about sort of the battle between man and animal. The band, again, is locked in. I think, again, Lars' drumming sounds pretty solid on here. The riff's solid. The bass is solid. Can't remember the guitar solo for the life of me if there was one. If not, and, so be it. But yeah, I thought the chorus of this track really stood out to me, in a sense. But otherwise, just a very, very solid track all around. And perhaps, once again, a consolation for those who felt double duped by Nothing Else Matters. It's just like, oh, you guys wrote a tender love song? You got to give us something back. And I guess this is sort of a consolation to that. But again, that's for the people who are just like, we're not those people.
Yeah. So, funny thing about this track here.
Here we go.
No. I love this track, man. It's a great track. So it's not like we've hit my least favorite track, but we have yet to see what the other two tracks are. And we're running out of tracks, ladies and gentlemen, so they're coming up here pretty shortly. But no, this track here rules. Funny thing happened to me whenever I first, when I was doing my detailed listening of this track. That opening, dude, it's hard as shit. I made like a metal face, like, oh yeah, kind of face whenever I was digging it. That opening rules. Vivid lyrics throughout the track here. It's going off the notion that you don't have to have grand lyrics that have this hidden theme. Like the way that Metallica utilizes lyrics in this song here, it's more of like, hey, this is just adding to the song's message, and not a message, but it's almost like a backdrop. Like, hey, this is describing what's going on. You get lyrics like "Bright is the moon, high in starlight, chill in the air, cold as steel tonight." You can really just picture hey, what the setting is for this track here. There's a guitar solo here. It's fantastic. I'm right there with you. The way that the band hits, and how everything comes together to accent certain moments, it's really good. And The main thing here that made me appreciate this song is that I loved how, like, yes, this is a thrash metal song. Yes, it is kind of, it could be pandering to, like, those thrash heads where that are upset that Enter Sandman and Nothing Else Matters and the Unforgiven exists. However, like, I feel like contrasting this song with Through the Never, of Wolf and Man, the band does enough in this track. They do maintain a solid groove, but they change it up enough where it doesn't become stale. Like, overall, I love how the band approached the song, and it's a solid song for me. We ran out of tracks to be in my top three. This track didn't come. It wasn't creeping up there, but I appreciate the hell out of this track.
I do too, and again, it's a very standard, solid track that I think does a good job following up the sort of artistic momentum of Nothing Else Matters, or at least the sonic momentum, and very much, I think we both agree that this is a very solid album track from this. So, moving on, we come to The God That Failed.
So earlier on in the review, I talked about like how James Hetfield's mother had died, and here's a little bit more of a fully fleshing out of that story, because this song is basically about that. So James's mother had cancer. She refused treatment though, based on her beliefs. That you should not be healed by doctors or take modern medicine. So she went to treatment as she tried to pray the cancer away, and that doesn't work. Let's be real. This isn't a Disney fairy tale or anything like that. So she ultimately died. Like I mentioned earlier, his father already left the family a few years prior to her death, and he was without a parent. So he took a look, like this song is basically taking a look at that event and how religion and God failed him, and this is basically exploring that. I'm gonna start with the good. So I like how this song here, how it has that thick bass intro working alongside those guitars, and again, this is where I did appreciate the studio recording of this, because whenever I was listening to this on my earbuds, you had guitars that were panning hard left and right, and then they joined together to make for a solid opening. The guitar solo in this track here, it's the best on the album. It's a fantastically structured solo, and I just love it. And yeah, the lyrical themes I do dig, and how you get lyrics like pride you took, pride you fell, pride that you felt when you'd kneel, trust you gave a child to save, left you cold and him in grave. You can get what James is going for, but dude, this song, it's not a bad song. Because there's enough working for it where it can keep it out of that the bottom two tracks here. But this is my third least favorite track on the album, mainly for the fact that I appreciate but I appreciate the menacing tone lyrically and vocally here, but the song kind of drags, man. The band is not doing enough instrumentally outside of the solo and outside of the intro to really hook me in. And it just seems like overall with this track here, the band just looks at the concept that they're trying to go for, and they think it's well enough on its own. It's just okay, James is going to carry us to the promised land, Kirk is going to do a solo, and that's it. That's all that you need to do. Finish. And I disagree with that. I mean, it's not a bad track. Let me specify. But if I had to be honest with you, and I am honest with you, this is my third least favorite track on the album.
I get where you're coming from. It did not land in my bottom three. Again, I don't have a bottom three. I don't even have a bottom one on this album. But I absolutely understand where you're coming from, because aside from, like you say, that sort of slow burn bass intro that you mentioned, and the guitar solo at the end of the album, or the end of the track, which I agree, if not for Enter Sandman, I would probably put this right at the top as well. In fact, Catch Me on the Right Day, I might. And I think, too, what makes the guitar stand out so much is the mundanity of the rest of the song, in a sense. The fact that the song is so kind of meh and boring and just sort of there. When that guitar comes through, it comes through so well. Because, again, everything else just sort of drops back and lets Kirk shine on here. And I kind of understand where your perspective of, it seems like there should be more to that than that of just, do track, Kirk solo, goodbye, wear check. But honestly, I think this track is fine. Again, it's not a standout track for me, except for that solo. And I think he did a pretty good job of inciting that. If not for that solo, this could easily be like the nothingest of nothing burgers.
All right, cool. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm curious to actually, after we get done with this review, like, I think I talk about this like with like every review that we do, checking out like more of the band's catalog. But I unfortunately, my squirrel brain is just like, oh hey, Melt Banana released a new album. Oh hey, Sabrina Carpenter released a new album. So
they did a combination album together, Sabrina Carpenter and Melt Banana.
Oh man, but yeah, I mean, I might check out like a couple of like Metallica's other works just to see like if I have kind of the same issues where like there's not much there, and it could just be with like what Metallica was experimenting with this album with, where like you get some of the slower stuff, and like obviously some of the stuff sucked me in, like nothing else matters, but other stuff, it doesn't seem like they're doing a whole hell of a lot. But that being said, you ready to talk about My Friend of Misery?
My Friend of Misery, it is the penultimate track on this album, and this track, I think it's the longest track on the album, if I'm not mistaken, or at least close to it. This track does go on for a long, long time. And once again, we have a track that, it honestly, in my mind, feels like the band kind of ripping itself off already. Because I heard a lot of stuff in this track, sonically, chord-wise, vocally, that sounded a lot like Enter Sandman. Not that that's a bad thing. Enter Sandman, as I've mentioned, is my favorite song on this album. So if you're going to rip off a song, might as well be that one. But aside from that, I really don't have a whole lot of other notes on this. I mean, drums sound good. James sounds good on vocal and guitar. Again, much like A Wolfen Man, can't remember the solo for the life of me. But again, I think this is at the point of the review that I should probably explain how I listened to this album. And the reason that I was able to do my review so quickly, or at least my notes so quickly compared to you, Ryan, as you had mentioned in our conversations, is that I have this album on CD. So I was just able to listen to it in my car over and over and over again until I was able to come up with my conclusions. So again, depending on, and I think that's something we need to explain to our listeners, is that depending on how you listen to it and how you experience it, it may change your views on this album. Like we were talking about last week with Kings of Leon, like you experienced it, Ryan, for the first time when you were getting into more, less, I won't say less mainstream, but different musical outlets than what you were used to. You're discovering your own music. And even then, from a sonic level, you listen to this album with earbuds in. I listen to it with car speakers. So, depending on your experience, you may have a different outlook on an album based on what you do. So it may not hurt every once in a while to change up the way you listen to an album. Like, so if you listen to this album in your car, maybe listen to it on earbuds, etc. And I'm saying all this for two reasons. One, to give our listeners sort of a thorough understanding of what it means to actually listen to an album and how different audio devices and different personal experiences could change your outlook on an album. And secondly, just to kill time, because I really do not have a damn thing to say about this song.
All right, so that was some filler there. All right, there we go.
Educated filler, but filler nonetheless.
Yeah. So, yeah, man, I'm gonna be honest with you. This song kind of sucks. Like, okay, so, I will say, like, I'll start with the good stuff, and then I'll just get into the reasons why this is my second least favorite track on the album. So, a little bit of a contextual element here. The whole "My Friend of Misery" is a track about an outsider's view of someone wandering in self-pity and having a very pessimistic view of the rest of the world. And with this track, I did appreciate like the bass intro. It's a solid it's a solid intro, and then you get the guitars that come splashing in. That adds a nice touch. And then like the dueling guitar solo section is pretty decent. But other than that, the song kind of sucks. Like, you get lyrics that are really surface level and basic, like, these times are sent to try men's souls, but something's wrong with all you see. You will take it on all yourself. Remember, misery loves company. Like, okay, is this like an 18-year-old writing like lyrics for the first time after like they realized that that their girlfriend broke up with them? Like what or they didn't make like the high school soccer team. Like, what the hell, dude? And then like you get the section that is initially marked as a bass solo, but it's not really a bass solo. Like, you just get that riffing, and the bass player is not allowed to explore anything else. Song drags, and like ultimately, like what I can kind of drew the comparison to is like it kind of reminds me of like butt rock stuff. And for those of you who are like, what's butt rock? There's probably a station that exists where you are currently living where like you can turn it on and they're like, hey, welcome to insert station name here, where we play nothing but rock. And like you get like songs like by Stain, Seether, 3 Days Grace, like kind of that elk. And My Friend of Misery kind of reminds me of that genre of music. And for that reason, the fact like surface level lyrics and like nothing really goes on, and like it kind of drags. Like, dude, this song kind of sucks in my opinion. Easily my second least favorite song on the album.
I get that. Again, there's really not a whole lot to write home about. I will say what kept it out of any sort of negative connotation for me is just the way that the band sounds. Like, I feel like if we really wanted to knock this album for any lyrical content, like, it would very well not be one of the better albums that we've ever reviewed. But again, the way that the band is produced, particularly by Bob Rock, and the way the band itself sounds does count for something to me, and I think it counts enough to keep this out of, and all tracks really, out of any sort of bottom pit. Like, there was not a track on this album where I was just like, no, absolutely not. At the very worst, it was, alright, cool.
Alright, so, let's, you ready to finish her off with The Struggle Within?
Let's finish it off with The Struggle Within.
So, my thoughts and feelings about this track here, like, you get, like, they're going back into that old school, like, thrashy vibes here. Like, the track does begin with, like, that old school snare and guitar intro. Like, I really did dig that. And lyrically, this song is based on the fact that that thoughts of like anxiety, depression, anger, or so something's like consuming the narrator within. Decent enough chorus. I like the call and response vocal passages. The guitar solo again is pretty fantastic. The lyrics are pretty surface level, but overall, like I really don't have that much to say about this song here specifically because there's a whole lot of nothing here. Again, it goes into that bucket of songs that are like, hey, this is Metallica going back into their thrashy roots and having fun with it, but there was a whole lot of nothing here. But like, comparing it to like other tracks like Through the Never and Wolf of Man, like, there's enough variety here to keep it out of like, the not a bad track like, bracket for me. But like, it doesn't, like, they don't do enough within this track here to elevate it up to like, hey, this actually takes it up to the next level, like with of Wolf and Man. So it's kind of like right in that middle, like, range for me. Kind of a interesting way to end off the album. Not that Metallica would be like, zeroed in on like sequencing at this point in their career, but like, a decent enough song. I don't hate it. It's just it's a good song at the end of the day.
I'm right there with you. It's an interesting way to close out the album. Again, I feel like this is another consolation track for older Metallica fans. And it definitely feels a bit more on the thrashy side of it. The band sounds fine. The lyrics are, like you say, surface level. And again, this is not something that is necessarily uncommon in music as a whole. Like right off the top of my head, I could think of Beyonce's Lemonade and the final track off that album, Formation, being very much in that same category of fan consolation of, hey, remember when we used to do this? Well, we still can do it. Here you go. But aside from that, again, I think this track is fine. It doesn't land in my top three. It doesn't land in my bottom three. I don't have a bottom three. It's fine. And I think we can pretty much just leave it at that.
All right. But you know what you know what is not fine but pretty good, man?
What?
The fact that we did it.
Not sure why you decide to phrase it that way, but go off.
Yeah. I really didn't stick the landing there, but yeah, we discovered what it means to be Metallica.
Pretty much, or at least the new, more polished Metallica, as was the case on this album. So I'll go ahead and go first this time around. And again, as I mentioned before during My Friend of Misery, your variation on how to experience this album may, dictate your thoughts on it. Again, I listened to this in the car, and this might be one of the best driving in-car albums of all time, just based off the sonic prowess that the band demonstrates from front to back. I mean, if you want to talk about the precision of, again, Lars's drumming, James's riffs, Jason's bass, and Kirk's solos, this really is a place to start and honestly finish. Like, again, the lyrics a lot of times are surface level, so that sort of denies it being a 10 out of 10. It does get a little riffy at times, but there were 3 albums that I were thinking about in regards to what score I wanted to give this album. 2 of them we reviewed, which were Led Zeppelin 4, Hard Feelings by Future Teens, and the album that I'm not going to mention yet because it'll be my recommended album in a few short minutes. Because, again, sonically, this is one of the most consistent albums that I've ever heard. Performance-wise, it's great. Lyrically, it ranges from great to okay. Oh man, I'm kind of tough on which way I want to go here. I'm going to say that Metallica is a 9 out of 10 for me.
Okay, cool. So yeah, my thoughts here. So I appreciated the opportunity to revisit an album like this because like I said, I was a bit of a Metallica head back in the day. Not so much anymore, and that's not by any beliefs or anything. It's just they just haven't been a conscious choice of mine to actually go back and listen to. But dude, this this is an album that's a classic album, but it also angers a lot of Metallica fans, and I can see why. but not for the reasons that they get upset about. Like, I love songs like Enter Sandman, Nothing Else Matters, but then, like, there's other songs where, like, I just feel like the tracks and the performances and things just kind of seem a little bit phoned in, and they're just, like, they're trying stuff, but it doesn't land, but there's other tracks where it does land. And overall, like, I did enjoy re-listening to this album. And yeah, overall, it's a good album. I'm going to rate it a 7.5 out of 10. So I'm going to...
Wow.
For the first time in a long time, I'm giving a partial score. So 7.5 out of 10 for me.
So that averages our scores out to an 8.25 out of 10.
Because math.
Now, the third album that I did not mention in my review of this album, I will mention now as to what the next recommended album would be. And it's another famously Black album, going back 11 years, and that is 1980's Back in Black by AC/DC. Because much like this album, that album also has a relentless groove that pretty much lays itself down right at the top and doesn't stop for 10 tracks. And the writing on it is pretty, again, sort of on a surface level, but if you're willing to forgive that, I can't necessarily recommend a better comparison to... Like, that is the blues rock version of the metal version of this album, if that makes any sense. Like, that is the blues rock and sort of basic, like, boogie rock. What this album, Metallica's, was the metal. Sort of a gold standard, or should I say black standard, of hard, purified, distilled rock and roll.
Always a huge fan of anything AC/DC does. I was also an AC/DC head back in the day, but that being said, the next album recommendation that I'm going to give, I was going to go one way, but ultimately I am going to recommend a Metallica album because, man, that's how I feel like I should be going. And the Metallica album that I'm going to recommend is their album, Master of Puppets. Probably, like, in terms of, like, thrashy albums from the first 4 studio albums, that one's probably the best, in my humble opinion. And probably a lot of people would agree. You get plenty of moments where, like, they really ride the thrash elements really well. And they also have, like, their slower moments too, like, Welcome Home Sanitarium. I think that's what the track is. I'm not gonna even fact check me right now. But then you get songs like Battery and, like, the title track, Master of the Puppets, like, pretty great tracks in their own right. So yeah, if you started with the Black Album and you want to check out another album from Metallica, my recommendation would be Master of Puppets.
I would have recommended that, but I have yet to listen to that album front to back. I'll have to do that sometime in the near future. But yeah, for those of you who have not listened to either Back in Black or Master of Puppets, all 5 of you, I would definitely give those albums a listen if you haven't done so yet. So Ryan, it is your turn to pick our next album. What do you have in mind?
All right, so Matthew, I'm going to take us on another journey here, another saga. It's going to be kind of comparable to, like, when we did the Boy Genius, journey, where we reviewed 3 albums from each artist, and then we did the big album. So for the next review, I'm going to start by having you pick between 2 different things. But ultimately, whatever you don't pick this time, when it's my turn to throw an album out on the docket, I will have that choice be that the next album we're going to cover. So either way, we're going to cover both albums in our show here. It's just a matter of what we're going to cover next week. Are you ready?
I am.
All right. Pick a number, 3 or 5.
I'm going to go with 5.
Okay. So for our next review, we are going to be talking about an album by the band The Raconteurs, and the album is Consolers of the Lonely. So, yeah, we're going to be going into the Jack White sphere here, man, with our next set of reviews here.
I dig it. I dig it. Another man that we've talked about in past broadcasts, and again, I think with time, our discussion will be a little bit more nuanced this time, or at least mine will be.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you've not listened to the album Consolers of the Lonely by the Raconteurs, make sure that you will listen to that album before next week's episode. That way you're familiar with what me and Matt are bringing to the table. Also, if you've gotten to this point in the review and then you have thoughts and opinions about the album that we've covered in this review, feel free to drop a comment below. I know that, YouTube obviously has a comment section, and I even found out that Spotify has a comment section. So let us know how you feel about the Black Album. Are you on the side of Matt, and even like me to an extent? Matt was definitely a lot higher on the album than I was, but I still appreciated what it brought to the table. Or are you that old school Metallica thrash metalhead where it's just like, this album is a flaming turd and it needs to die? Just let us know. You have anything else to add about this album and this review as a whole before we kick it on out?
All I will say is that if we do get those legions of Metallica fans or sections of them that you mentioned, it will be interesting to see what they say in the comment section, because, again, like you alluded to earlier, conversations about Metallica's music can get a little divisive.
Yeah. And you know what else is, I don't know. I was going to pivot over and try to, flip us into the outro by using the word divisive. But you know what I just kind of, I'm embracing as a new mantra nowadays?
What's your new mantra from 90 minutes ago?
You just got to have an open mind for a different view. And, just keep in mind you have that open mind for a different view, and then just nothing else matters.